Picture this. You're on like the perfect first date. You've got the picnic basket, you found this amazing secluded beach, the sun is setting. It's just perfect. You break out some fruit to share, and then out of nowhere, your date's head is being bashed in with a club. Yeah, you just watched your date get executed. So, what was the horrible crime that deserved this, brutal instant death sentence? You heard that right. A banana. In ancient Hawaii, if you were a woman, eating a banana was a capital offense. So, welcome to a very different version of paradise. One where a single wrong move, one bite of the wrong fruit, meant you were immediately, violently put to death. So, how on earth could something like that happen? Well, this wasn't just some random act of violence. This was the law. We're about to dive into this incredibly complex and honestly deadly system of sacred roles that controlled every single aspect of life in ancient Hawaii. And that system had a name: Kapu. Now, you gotta understand, Kapu wasn't just a list of polite suggestions. No, no. Think of it more like the ultimate set of divine commandments written in stone. Breaking a Kapu wasn't just illegal, it was seen as a direct insult to the gods themselves. And the punishment? Well, that was all about making the angry gods happy again. Okay, so the key to understanding all of this is a concept called mana. Mana was this spiritual energy, right? A life force that was in everything. People, places, objects. But the chiefs, the Ali, they were considered direct descendants of the gods, so they were just overflowing with the stuff. The entire Kapu system was basically built to protect this spiritual power grid, especially the super high voltage mana that the chiefs carried around. So how did this whole divine law thing actually play out in, daily life? Well, let's start with something super simple: dinner. Because as you're about to see, the rules around food were some of the most common and absolutely the most deadly for the average person. All right, let's go back to that scene I described at the start. It seems totally normal, right? A guy and a girl just sharing a meal. But in ancient Hawaii, this completely innocent-looking picture would have ended in absolute bloodshed. So the question is, why? The reason is it's both fascinating and unbelievably brutal. It was strictly Kapu for men and women to eat together, period. The belief was that a woman's presence would spiritually defile the food, contaminate it, making it unworthy of the male gods it was supposed to honor. And when this law was broken, you can guess who paid the price. It was always the woman, and it was usually with a club to the head. And that brings us right back to our deadly banana. See, bananas were believed to be the physical body of Kanaloa, the god of the underworld. So for women, absolutely forbidden. But here's where it gets even crazier. Out of around 70 types of bananas in ancient Hawaii, only 3 were considered safe for women to eat. So let's do the math. That's like a 96% chance that taking a single bite of a random banana would get you killed. Talk about a dangerous snack. Oh, and the deadly menu did not stop there. Pork? Nope, that was off limits. That was the god Lono. So if a woman wanted red meat, guess what her only choice was? Dog. Seriously. Coconuts? Also Kapu, forbidden. That was the body of Ku, the god of war. So yeah, while the men were feasting, women were stuck with let's just say, a much, much more limited menu. But look, as dangerous as the dinner table was, it was nothing compared to the rules about the chiefs. You have to remember, these guys were seen as walking gods, just brimming with mana, and offending an Ali, even completely by accident, was pretty much the fastest way to get yourself killed. Just take the law of the shadow, for example. Your shadow was thought to be like an extension of your actual soul. So if your shadow so much as touched a chief, that's a death sentence. If your shadow fell on his house, yep, also death. And God forbid you actually accidentally stepped on his shadow, whoa, that was seen as you trying to steal his mana, the ultimate insult. And that earned you an especially gruesome execution. And the list just keeps going. You couldn't look a chief in the eye. You couldn't touch their hair or nail clippings after they were cut, because their mana was still in them and could be used for black magic. Wearing the royal colors, red and yellow, forget about it. And you absolutely could not be physically higher than a chief. So if one was walking by, you, as a commoner, had to lie face down on the ground until they passed. And their idea of mercy back then was, a little different from ours. For example, if a very small child broke a kapu, some chiefs were seen as being lenient. And what did lenient mean? Well, they might let the kid live after they gouged out one of their eyes. Yeah, real merciful. And it wasn't just people you had to worry about offending. The natural world itself was tangled up in the Kapu system. Just trying to interact with the land and the sea was like walking through a minefield of deadly rules. Now, what's interesting is that some of these laws were actually really practical. Like it was Kapu to catch certain fish, opelu and aku, during their spawning season. I mean, that's basically an ancient conservation law, which is pretty smart. But then you had the moi fish, which was supposedly the most delicious fish in all of Hawaii. Was that Kapu for conservation? Nope. It was forbidden for commoners simply because the chiefs wanted it all for themselves. Chanting was a whole other danger zone. See, these weren't just songs. They were considered powerful spiritual spells, and only high priests could perform them. So if you were a commoner and you got caught chanting, executed. A woman chanting? Death sentence. If you were a priest but you just messed up the words or used a chant for the wrong reason, you guessed it, killed on the spot. So when you think of Hawaii today, what comes to mind? You know, this global symbol of relaxation, of paradise? It's just wild to think it's all built on a history that was, well, anything but relaxing. The contrast is absolutely staggering. I mean, just think about it. Back then, a woman couldn't even touch a coconut. Today, piña coladas for everybody. Back then, catching the wrong fish would get you killed. Today, it's the star of world-famous poke bowls. Your shadow used to be a deadly weapon. Now it's just a great way to get some shade while you're tanning. A man and a woman sharing a meal was a fatal crime. And today, it's one of the most popular honeymoon spots on the planet. It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? These places we see as perfect escapes, as paradise, so often have these brutal, complicated histories bubbling just beneath the surface. And it kind of begs the question, right? How many other paradises out there are built on a history that we've all just chosen to forget?